All right, perfect. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Danae Wolf. I am the Educational Technology Specialist for Ohio State University Extension, and I'm super excited about today's webinar. This is the last webinar in a series that's been going on since probably winter now. And this session is all about accessibility. So we have two people who are going to lead this morning session. We have Megan Fogel from our Office of Distance Education and E-Learning. And Megan worked very closely with some of the OD folks in the sort of the crafting of the new university accessibility policy. And she is going to talk to us today about how to create accessible content for basically the digital world. So how do we go about making sure that our digital content is accessible? And then we also have Eric Owens on the call. And Eric is he's our new college accessibility coordinator, and he is going to share with us a little bit about the accessibility policy and what it means for those of us in Extension and CFAES and how to apply that. So I'm going to hand this over to Eric as we get started. I'm not sure that Eric has a camera that he can turn on or not. I will let him do that if he is able. But Eric, you are good to go.
Okay. If everyone can hear me, I didn't know I was going to start. Basically, I'm just here to kind of tell a little bit about the new policy that's in place. Really, the accessibility standard policy for standards has been in place at the university for a few years now. But what they just recently implemented is a review process, which means that right now what they face this a lot like the security review process that came into place in the past, that for the moment, all new implementations and major upgrades of various software things need to be reviewed before they can be put in place. So we've put it in place to review anything when it goes through a purchase process. So you can expect that if you go to purchase a new software package or subscribe to a service online, that it will end up at kind of a stop in the process to submit a accessibility review. And what kind of review is required is based on the audience, how widely the software is used, and whether or not it's used as part of curriculum. Right now, it's still at the beginning of this process, so the cost and time is kind of an estimate, but what they're telling us from the university office right now is expect that when you're doing your budgeting, that this will add about 25% to time and cost to the cost of acquiring or subscribing to software services online. As you go through, Megan is going to show you a bunch of specifics and stuff like that. But if you're ever like doing research on a specific thing and how to make it accessible as far as the web goes, we are, the university takes on the WCAG 2.0 AA standard. And so if there's ever like a list of this is what this standard is and this is what this standard is, that's the standard we follow at the university in theory. So I guess that's all I'm going to say, is just that I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware that when you go to purchase or subscribe for software, that you should expect a review process in there now. And I can also answer any questions when that time comes.
All right. Thank you so much for being on today, Eric. I really, really appreciate your help in that and understanding. And I think that will be more clear too as time goes on. I think we'll probably have additional accessibility information and training and job aids to really help us understand what that means for those of us in the college and extension as well. So I am going to hand it over to Megan, and I believe she is going to share her screen. So I will stop mine. We are getting a couple questions in for Eric. So Richard asked, that would be 25% added to the cost of software. Is that what we could expect?
So that is what I'm being told by the University Accessibility Office, that they said that that should be kind of a guideline expectation. Now, some things won't cost that much, but like I said, this is the beginning of the process. They're basing this on the first few things that have kind of gone through the whole process, but some things will, like I said, it's based on audience. Some things we'll be able to do a quick internal review of. some things we're going to have to pay for an external review, which can actually be costly in theory. As far as the second question, right now, the second question is whether this goes for ongoing software we pay for on a monthly basis, or just for other things. For the moment, it is on new implementations and major upgrades. So things that we already subscribe to and get renewed, this review process would not apply to at this time. Now, if you get a new subscription to something that is a monthly subscription kind of thing, then yes, the review process would apply to that new subscription, and we would have to go through the process. Now, the 25% is just kind of an estimate. It's not about, you know, an actual thing. It's just an estimate of what we think it might end up costing. Hopefully that helps.
Yes, that is helpful. Thank you, Eric. All right, I think Megan is ready. I think her camera is working. She's going to turn on her camera and she has slides. And thank you so much for being here with us today, Megan. I'm really excited to have you again.
Of course, thank you. So I'm going to share my screen. I've got a few slides to get through. Let's see. And can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so I'm Megan Fogel. I'm sitting in my apartment, but good to be here. And so I am an instructional designer and our kind of unofficial accessibility lead in the Office of Distance Education and E-Learning. I'm specifically on the distance education team, and so my day-to-day includes a lot of accessibility, but it's specific to fully online courses and degree programs. So we work a lot with CFAES with their online programs, but I'm happy to always do this kind of stuff with Extension and with everybody in the college. So I know a little bit about the accessibility policy. I was involved in the rollout of it. I work closely with the Digital Accessibility Services Department that is kind of implementing the rollout and training up coordinators like Eric. So I'm happy to answer a couple more questions too, and we can kind of figure out together what this means for everybody. So I'm going to jump in today, though, with some 5 common issues and solutions. These are just the things that will matter in your day-to-day when you're thinking about accessibility. And so I always like to think about this in terms of, do we want to be proactive or reactive? For those that are teaching, we always have student life disability services, which would be the reactive arm of accessibility. And that would be when you have a specific student or specific user in place that has a complaint. There are always funds to help remediate right then, retroactively or reactively. But we want to think about being proactive with this. And so that kind of helps you wrap your mind around your responsibilities under this new interim digital accessibility policy. There are pieces of it that apply to you, not just in purchasing. It deals with instructional materials. It deals with public-facing materials. The implementation that Eric was talking about is just that first phase of it. And so this is always something good to be thinking about proactively, right? So 5 common issues and solutions. So today we're going to talk about understanding the need for fixing accessibility issues. I have a feeling that all of you understand why that's important, but we're going to go through it again. And I thank you again for being here. That's the first step. We're going to identify some accessibility issues and some fixes to go along with it, some solutions. And we're going to establish some accessible content creation habits, right? All of this is a practice. This isn't something that I want you to go back and completely uproot the way you've been doing everything. This is something that you continue to refine over time, and it really is just another digital skill. So, what do we know about our learners? And I've said this in the past, I think the last time I was on, but I'm so used to talking about academic courses and talking about learners. This is the same as talking about a user. And so if you are not dealing directly with learners, we're all learners, but you might think of this as users or if not students. So we know that they are increasingly diverse. They're interacting with us and our content through a screen. They learn, they consume information in different ways, and they face different roadblocks. And so that's that proactive piece. We want to be able to anticipate those challenges and those needs so that we're able to not be caught off guard, right? And so that we're able to provide an equitable experience. According to the policy and according to a lot of definitions online, digital accessibility is the equitable experience of consuming digital materials for those with disabilities. I don't know if that's exact phrasing, but that's basically the idea. And so we want to make sure that we can do that in a timely manner. And that's why it's so important to be proactive and start thinking about these things now. So this goes hand in hand with universal design for learning, and so that's the UDL down here. We know that no two learners or users are the same. I don't necessarily like putting people into categories, but when we think about accessibility and universal design for learning and really trying to make this a universal and accessible experience, it does help to think about the unique challenges of those with different disabilities, right? We want to be able to meet those needs. And so we like to think of this in a couple different categories, right? We think of those with mobility differences, vision differences, hearing differences, learning differences, communication differences, and attention differences. Now those first three, mobility, vision, and hearing, are pretty tangible, right? We think about wheelchair ramps, we think about captions for hearing, we think about alt text and some other stuff for vision. Learning, communication, and attention are sometimes grouped together as cognitive disabilities, and it just kind of depends who you're talking to. And there's special attention paid to those. And that's really where universal design for learning comes in, because we never know exactly how someone is experiencing something, and we want to think about being as inclusive as possible. And think about the little subtle barriers that might be in the way that we've designed something. So universal design for learning actually comes from a lot of different industries. Universal design is a concept used in designing airplanes, right? It's thinking about what would every single user need, and how can we meet the needs of the majority of those, or the most unique needs of those. And so universal design for learning is something that we find that it actually, the attention that you pay to it and the proactive work that you put into accommodating those with unique challenges actually ends up benefiting everyone. And so that's kind of the coolest thing that I find in it. So I wanted to give you a quick example, and this one is a little bit more academic, but it's a very a simple idea here. So maybe this is a prompt for a sociology course or something like that, right? We have find an image that represents cognitive bias in society. So I wonder if somebody can jump in the chat and just tell me what they think the problematic word is there. What would be the barrier? Yeah, so Amy got an image, right? And so we see that there's just a tiny little barrier here that limits what the user, what the student can show, what they know. And so we change that to artifact, and all of a sudden they can bring in a podcast, they can bring in an article, they can bring in a video, and it still gets at that core learning objective of cognitive bias. We are all teaching in some way, and so I want to think about the learning objectives that you have for your users or your stakeholders or who you're interacting with or your students, and what subtle ways you might be limiting their ability to interact with you or your content. Cool. Yeah, a bunch of people got that. So there are three main pillars of UDL. There are multiple means of engagement, and so we're trying to provide multiple ways for students to connect and interact with the content, students or users. And so ways that they can interact online, ways that they can reach out to you. Multiple means of representation would be the presentation of your content. This is the biggest one that can really, I can dive really deep on this and get into the way that we're presenting our content in all of our different document formats and making sure that those are accessible and giving them multiple means through that, right? Not just a video, but providing a text-based resource as well. And then multiple means of expression. If there is engagement in the course, are there options, or in the resource, are there options for those users or those students to demonstrate what they know and interact in a way of their choosing? So this makes a little bit more sense in a course context, but we're going to talk through that as well. So today I am going to talk a lot on multiple means of representation. We're talking through course content, what that means, or content that you're putting on your websites. I'm sorry, I keep saying courses. I'm so used to this. These multiple means of engagement and multiple means of expression, those other pillars, yes, this is being recorded, are something that you can research a little bit on your own. And that's something that I'm happy to take questions all the time if you've got a unique scenario that you want to talk through. So we're going to dive in to 5 common issues and solutions. This is the core of the content today, and we're going to go through what it means to make accessible documents, websites, hyperlinks or links to websites, alt text for your images, and captions on your video. So the first one we've got here, documents. And so my first example, there are a lot of different types of documents that you can use. The most common issue that I see across the web, across online courses specifically, are scanned documents. And so if you've ever taken a book off a shelf, scanned that in using a scanner, and then uploaded that to a website, sent it out in an email, added it to a course, those are just images of text. And so think about the usability there for someone that is using a screen reader, might have vision differences using a screen reader, which is the assistive technology that those with vision differences use to have the screen content read out to them. And so it goes really fast. If you've never heard a screen reader, I encourage you to search on YouTube an example just to hear that audio of how quickly it can go. And how those with vision differences really can speed through and use a computer in the same way as the rest of us. What really slows it down is when we haven't thought about accessibility for those users. So a scanned image of text is not searchable. It's not readable by a screen reader. It's not something that I can highlight if I want to do that. I can't search by keyword. And so really scanning that, using optical character recognition in Adobe Acrobat Pro or any other PDF software that you're using is actually how you're going to make that readable. It's another example where you do that and then all of a sudden it's keyword searchable, it's highlightable, it's much more usable for your students or your learners. So optical character recognition, you do just a quick search to see if that's something that you can do in your PDF software. It takes about 2 seconds just to run through. It scans the whole page and it's really awesome and renders that as readable text. So that's one quick solution. Now you're probably thinking there's plenty of other types of documents, not just PDFs. This is a screenshot of what that actually looks like. So this is in Adobe Acrobat Pro. I go to text recognition under tools. And in this file, and then it searches all 15 pages and it outputs readable text. And so this was actually an example from my master's program online. There were a couple PDFs that weren't readable text. So that was good practice. And so that's OCR, optical character recognition. So there are plenty of other types of documents, and so I've got a little bit on Word and PowerPoint here. Those are probably the most common that you're using. There are accessibility features built into Word and PowerPoint, and they're getting better and better. They will often allow you to add alt text right when you're putting an image in, and it'll prompt you with a little explanation of why to do this for accessibility, which I think is cool. So using accessibility features in Word and PowerPoint actually allows you to convert to an accessible PDF more easily. It's more readable by a screen reader. And another thing that people often don't think about is that we want these documents to also be usable by someone who must navigate with only a keyboard. And so we would call that being keyboard accessible. That is specifically useful for those with mobility differences, right? And so maybe not able to use a mouse due to motor difficulties, but being able to use a keyboard and tab through requires that things are set up properly. And so the things to pay attention to as you're learning about this is the use of heading styles or templates. There are a couple of OD, I think, Word templates, Word document templates, I'm sure that the college has some as well, that would allow you to just kind of use the formatting and styling that's already built in that kind of matches and looks nice. It will look nice, but it will also have appropriate heading styles so that those using screen readers or those using just a keyboard to navigate would be able to tab through and interact at a heading level and not just word by word through the document, right? It can be kind of daunting on a 15-page document to not be able to get a scan of what is there, looking at the subtitles and that kind of stuff, right? We want to be able to build that in so somebody can jump from heading to heading to kind of get a auditory table of contents, I kind of like to call it sometimes. Alt text on images is something I'm going to talk about a little bit later too, but this is something to pay attention to in all of your documents to make sure that when you're adding an image, you decide whether that's decorative or not. Some software will allow you to check a little box that says it's decorative, and a screen reader will just kind of skip it. It's not worth paying attention to. If it is an image that has important content in it, you want to think about adding alt text to that. It's just a description that goes along with the data of that photo and is read out by a screen reader. You can also think about, is this a complex image? Does this need a caption? Could it benefit everyone, right? And then we're talking a little bit more later about descriptive hyperlinks and making sure that the links that you embed in your resources aren't just click here or read more, so that your users know exactly where they're going and why.
Megan, can I interrupt for one quick second? We did get a question in that asked regarding document accessibility, is e-publication format, which uses HTML, better than PDF format?
I don't know if I can say that for sure. I think there's things that can go wrong with both of them, but I don't know. That's a good question. I think it actually could be, given that PDFs can come from all different places, right? You can generate a PDF from a PowerPoint or from a Word document. There's a lot more room for error. And so that's something that, yeah, I'd be curious to look into. Good question. Okay. Oops. So I'm going to talk a little bit about websites. I'm sure you guys are linking to websites whenever you can, but those need to be accessible as well. And so just as much as we're thinking about the credibility of those sites, maybe thinking about the timeliness, right? There's journalistic qualities, thinking about, is this biased? We also want to think, is it built with accessibility in mind? And so often, we will find an amazing resource that's on a website that hasn't been updated in a long time, that really isn't built with accessibility in mind. And so we want to use the Wave toolbar here. It's something that you can use as a Chrome plugin. It might be available for other browsers as well. You can also just do a search for the Wave toolbar, and they have a website where you can plug in a URL. And it gives you an output that looks a little bit like this. It's kind of chaotic. This is on a Yahoo homepage, and this screenshot is from a while ago. And it shows me that I've got 21 big red alert errors. And so these are those WCAG 2.0 AA guidelines, right? These are the standards across the internet for accessibility. And it's saying that there are 21 big errors. Most of them I'm experienced with looking through what the output is from Yahoo's pages. Most of them are usually on these images right here not having alt text. And so those are big things to pay attention to. We've got 56 alerts that might take like a manual check, and I don't expect you all to know that, but this is something to think about. Are we sending students to reputable sources, and have they thought about accessibility? If they haven't, but it is good content, maybe we take some of that, put it into a Word document where we have a little bit more control over the accessibility of it and cite that properly, right? So test a site for accessibility using a web accessibility evaluation tool. There are quite a few out there on the market. I just happen to like the Wave toolbar. I have it as a plugin, so I just click the little W in my toolbar or my bookmarks bar, and it allows me to get a quick scan of what's there. So if you were to test out, say, a .gov website, which I'm sure many of you are sending people to, those are now mostly fully accessible, and that's a change in the last couple years, which probably took way too long, right? But that's something to be aware of. So the third thing that I'm talking about is links. And so this is our descriptive hyperlinks. And so this is when we're actually writing the text to send someone to a website. And so a lot of times we'll see a hyperlink of click here or read more. As a screen reader user or as somebody that is going through using a keyboard, I'm not necessarily going to know what click here is taking me to, especially if I'm using a screen reader and can't see the context of the sentence around it. A lot of times, just as screen reader users are jumping from header to get a layout of the page or of the resource, they are also jumping from link to link. And so I think of this as a Wikipedia page, right? There are so many hyperlinks within it referencing all these different topics that are relevant. If all of those said click here, it would be much less useful, right? So what we want to do is use descriptive hyperlinks. There's a lot of research out there about when and why to use descriptive hyperlinks, but really what this does is it gives link context to screen reader users. It gives them a little bit more understanding of why to go there. So I have a couple examples here. And so this first one, I have the URL at the top. That's a Resource Center article. If you're not familiar with the OD Resource Center, that's definitely something to check out, and I'll give a little tour of that later. But we have a non-descriptive example here that says, to learn more about how to make content accessible, click here. Now, click here is the hyperlink, right? But if I were to jump down to the page and just hear external link, click here, it wouldn't give me a ton of information. A better option would be to say, to learn more about how to make content accessible, read the 5 ways to improve accessibility article. Now when I get there, I'm tabbing through the page, I get to external link, read the 5 ways to improve accessibility article. And I say external link or external URL because that's actually how a screen reader will read it out. And we want to be able to anticipate that. The same thing with this down below. I have a page within a Carmen course that I want to link to. And so instead of saying on this page, I might say on the presentation page, just giving a tiny bit more context of why somebody might want to go there. A lot of times, best practice for descriptive hyperlinks is just to use the article title or the page title that you're sending someone to. All right, zooming through these because I want to have time for question and answer later. We've got alt text. So any images that you're putting into documents, into web pages, into resources, you'll have an option to add alt text. If you're using some sort of software that doesn't allow you to add alt text, that's a major accessibility issue, right? And it's on us to learn how to do that in the different software that we use. But those are the types of things that Eric will be working on, looking at the software that we're all using and making sure that accessibility options have been built in, right? So in Word, in PowerPoint, in your email, in Carmen Canvas, in any website builder, you will have an option to use and to add alt text. And so most screen readers will read out this artifact kind of by the default file name if you don't go in and change it. It'll either be the default file name that's read out, so image, and this example here would be buckeyeleaf-gray-cmyk.png, right? It's like almost descriptive, but not really. It doesn't really give me a ton of information, but I know that this would be decorative anyway. If this was a more complex image, we wouldn't want it to default to the file name of just gibberish.jpg, right? Or gibberish.png. We would want to add a little bit more descriptive alt text there. And so we would want to add, for this one, gray buckeye leaf, or the option to mark it as decorative if that's an option in your content builder. So in any software you're using, look and do some research on how to add alt text to your images. In Word, in PowerPoint, it's very similar. You go to the format options for your image, and there's a prompt there to add alt text. Best practice is to do just 1 or 2 sentences, right? If you're feeling like you need to add more description, it might be worth considering doing a caption for everyone below it, or adding an audio description, right? If it's something that's really complex, it might be worth putting a little a little piece of audio embedded below that of you describing it, which is something that we're seeing more and more with infographics and complex graphs, because it's really worth talking through. So I have a couple images here I want to see in the chat. I know we've got another conversation kind of going on, but let's brainstorm just kind of what some good alt text is or would be for both of these images, right? They might be decorative. We might not need anything, but maybe these are in a page about medical resources or health resources. So 1 to 2 sentences, maybe even less, how you would describe these images. Maybe type into the chat. Physician reviewing billing information. Yeah, that's really good. Oh, that's a good question, Suzanne. So she asked, does the alt text info follow the content through different software? Sometimes, yes. I have yet to master exactly how to get it to do that, and so it's always good when you're taking or converting to a different format or taking it into different software to do a check on that alt text. Doctor reading charts, surgical team planning their week. That's good, yeah. So there might be a more specific context based on where this is going or how you're using it, and maybe that is more meaningful for your users. Awesome. Okay. All right. Issue 5, captioning. This is a big one, and we can spend some time talking about this. So what we want to think about is, that audio or video without transcripts or closed captioning are unusable to those with hearing differences, right? This is getting at one of those big, more tangible disabilities, right? Hearing differences. And really there are tons of options for doing captioning. There are both DIY options and paid options. We are closing up an RFP at the university to have a pre-negotiated contract with a couple different vendors, and that's totally opt-in, so each department would have to open their own PO to do that. But that's definitely an option for a paid model in the future. I know various departments have their own solutions right now through different vendors. And then there are DIY options. And so a lot of you have probably played around with the captioning in YouTube. The algorithm has gotten a lot better. They have automatic captions that you can actually go in, and if you were the one that uploaded the video, you can go in and edit those captions, because they're going to get names misspelled, they're going to get terms misspelled, and things are going to be a little bit off, but you can actually go in and edit that and have a little bit of control even over the timings of those captions. This is actually something worth mentioning, because I was looking at that recording from the last time I spoke that was emailed out, and the captions on that are huge chunks of text that actually that block most of the content. And so it's just a matter of those timings. And so that's just a little thing to think about, that there's always best practices with captions. And so there's an idea that captions actually improve the experience for everyone. So how many of you have kind of turned on captions on a video before? I don't know if we have a raise hand option, but yeah, there you go. Randy, Amy, Richard, Baldwin, great. So 80% of those who use captions have no disability. Can you guys type in the chat and tell me what are some of the reasons you may, yeah, your wife is deaf, so all the time, awesome. What are some of the other reasons that you might turn on closed captioning on a video? Toddler sleeping nearby. Yeah, you don't want to make too much noise. No headphones. Yeah, other noise in the room, right? Sometimes we think about accents on the video, or you're an English as a second language speaker yourself. Sometimes we think about complex terminology in the video. We want to understand what that word actually looks like, how to spell it. Maybe the speaker is really, really fast, like me. Yeah, educating children to read while listening, right? There's dual processing there in our minds. That's awesome. That's a really good point. So 80% of people who use captions have no disability. And so this goes back to that universal design for learning type of idea, where the work that we put in and the accommodations that we make with those with disabilities in mind actually end up benefiting everyone. We see that time and time again. We see that, you know, our what do you want to call them, like a device assistant, like a Siri or an Alexa, something like that. Those technologies actually originated with those with disabilities in mind and have now become mainstream. And captions themselves have become incredibly mainstream. You scroll through Facebook and even the dumb little cooking videos, every single thing has captions on it, which makes it a lot easier for all users. All right. So we want to make and add captions to video content to make our videos usable to all learners. And so what I have here is the YouTube interface, and it changes all the time. And so this one might be a little bit out of date. I know our YouTube channel right now, we're in the beta version. I have no idea how to navigate it, but I'm learning. So this is kind of the rough outline of what it looks like to edit captions in YouTube. And so this was an interview that we used for one of our online courses, and we can see that we see the timing along the bottom. It shows you when that specific chunk of captioning is ending, and it shows you an editable piece over on the side where you can actually change. If they had spelled something wrong, we can change it over there. And so that's definitely an option. You also have the ability, there's a little drop down under actions here that allows you to download the captioning file. And so if you are more comfortable hosting your videos in MediaSite or another platform, you actually have the option to download the captions from YouTube. It's called an SRT file. There are a bunch of different types of captioning file, but SRT is the one that I find is most usable. And you can actually upload that and attach it to your video in MediaSite or whatever other platform. And that's a good way that we actually encourage faculty to do that as well. There's a resource here that I'll make sure gets sent out, but how to actually go through step by step and create captions in YouTube. All right, I'm gonna sit on this screen for a minute and try and catch up on the chat a little bit, but let me know if you've got other questions. And I think everyone might be muted, so if you want to take your question to the chat. Yeah, Alice, I'll make sure that gets sent out.
While we're waiting for some questions, I will mention that all Zoom recordings now that get recorded to the cloud will automatically be captioned, and they use Otter AI for captioning, which is wonderful, but that is the tool that I was using, the free account, that created those huge like screen covering captions. And again, like Megan said, that all comes down to the SRT file, the timing. They're basically saying on this time there's going to be this huge caption, instead of saying this time there's going to be a small caption, then this timestamp there's going to be a small caption. So you end up just getting like an entire screen of captions that fills everything, which is not great. I think Otter AI does a better job of actually transcribing than YouTube, but YouTube's obviously look a lot better because they don't cover the content. So I'm wondering if Otter AI will become better as more and more people use it, and hopefully they might adapt that. But I don't know if anybody else has experience using the Otter AI and having that same issue. Something I've been trying to figure out.
Yeah, and I'd be curious if you can get into the back end, because it is on YouTube, to be able to edit the timings, even though that was how the captions were generated.
And I think you can do that with Otter AI too, which is very tedious. Like for an hour-long recording, it's going to take you several hours probably to go in and like actually edit line by line what was said. So we are getting a few people saying, can we repeat all of the questions coming into the chat? Because some of you are sending the questions only to panelists. So you can send them to panelists and all attendees, and you can choose that in the little blue box down at the bottom. Otherwise, if we could make a point to repeat the question so that everybody knows what you are referring to, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. So what I've got here from Jennifer, can ODS, so Student Life Disability Services now, testing proctors edit closed captions? I don't know if I know what you mean by that. I think if it's a video that was sent to a student or sent to a proctor, they wouldn't have control over it, but I'm not sure what Student Life Disability Services now actually has or does. So that would probably be a question for them. captions are always the one with questions, and I think it really is still it still is kind of a manual process, even though we rely on these algorithms and AI sometimes to caption this for us, but there still is there still are a lot of manual processes and a lot of paid options. Okay, so if a professor sends in a clip link, can we edit the clips for students? I don't believe so, but I'm not sure. And there is actually something called amara.org, which I sometimes share. It's here, I'll type it into the chat. This is actually kind of a crowdsourced captioning platform that if you had found a video on YouTube that you really liked, but it didn't have captions, you obviously don't own it, to be able to get into the back end, you can go to amara.org and see if somebody else had already requested captions for that. And it is a platform where it does that same interface of kind of editing the captions, editing the timings, but anybody can edit them. And so it's actually kind of a crowdsourced captioning platform to see if somebody had already done that. Or you can request that they be captioned, and the Good Samaritans of the internet will help you do that. You can also send students or users there to say, hey, let's all contribute to the captions for this video so that we can get it done, so that we have an accessible version. It's kind of a cool thing. Okay, so Richard said, alt text for CFAES Drupal sites is required for images, but the uploader has options to not display it if it negatively affects the visual layout. So the alt text remains for screen readers. Okay, so I think what you're saying is that you are uploading an image to your Drupal site, right, to your website. You can choose not to display the alt text, which is totally normal. If you're displaying the alt text, that's actually more like a caption, and I think that is at your discretion, whether you think every user needs to see that. And then the alt text still remains for screen readers, so I think that's totally fine. Yeah. That's awesome. Good to know. Cool. Okay, so I've got a couple little things here, and these are just priorities to think about. So we have when you're evaluating sources or resources and when you're creating resources, right? These are two big activities that you're doing day to day. So when we're thinking about evaluating, these are the big questions I want you to ask. Do documents have a structure that's easy to navigate? Do websites have a structure that's easy to navigate? And maybe you use the Wave toolbar to try and evaluate that. Do hyperlinks have descriptive text? Do images have alt text? And do videos have closed captions? So these are the big things that I've hit on today, right? What do we actually have there that's helping accessibility when you're choosing sources? Now, when we're creating sources, it's in our control, right? And that's where those good content creation habits come in. So we want to create documents that use heading structures and tables of contents. If there's a lot there, you want to break that out. We want to link to websites that are reliable and credible and accessible. We want to write descriptive hyperlinks in all your materials. Now, the caveat to that is in a PowerPoint, right? In a presentation where I'm saying I've got a link here, but you can't click it because it's on my screen, right? And so in that case, there are options and there is precedent to type out the full URL. Keep in mind that nobody's going to remember a 52-line or 52-character URL. And so think about using URL shorteners like go.osu, which will create a quick little thing where you can choose the text that goes into that URL and it'll redirect. Yeah. There's also security kind of questions to think about when linking to URLs. Sometimes you'll see an email come in from maybe OCIO and it'll say, go to this resource to fill out this form. And then below it, it will say, alternatively, copy this URL into your browser, right? Because some people have, they want to be really careful about what they're actually clicking on, right? And so they want to know what that URL looks like and be able to copy it in themselves. add alt text to all images and graphs, right? This is good to start looking around in all the platforms that you use, right? Sounds like some of you are using Drupal. I know you're using email. I know you're using Word. To start looking around to see how you can add alt text with that and start practicing. And then caption your videos. Now, when we talk about good content creation habits, a lot of times I'm talking to faculty about the lecture videos that they're creating. And I know you all are creating plenty of video as well. Thinking about how you start. Are you starting with an outline? Is that something that could be useful as an alternative format for your users to look at? Are you getting closer to a script? And maybe that's something that you can use to easily create captions. Is that something that you can also provide? Students and users and webinar attendees are always going to ask for copies of slides. And so that's something to keep in mind to make sure that those are accessible when you're doing a presentation as well. And I encourage you to be critical about the accessibility of my slides when I send them out. They're not always perfect, and sometimes I change them up on the fly and forget to add alt text, right? So it's always a learning experience, and it's iterative, and we want to just get better over time. Oops. So this is just kind of start from where you are, right? I don't need you to go out and redo everything that you've been doing. And like Eric has said, the policy really starts with those pieces that are brand new that we're creating, those purchases that we're making. We want to start from here on, and then eventually the policy does cover legacy materials, legacy software purchases, and all that kind of stuff, and so we'll handle that as we go. So just to jump in, start with one piece of content. What is actually useful about it? What do your users need to do with that content? And what might be a barrier to engagement or to access? And just start to ask yourself those questions as you're evaluating your content. So I've got further learning resources here, and like I said, I've got these URLs kind of fully listed out here. So the first one is the Resource Center. So most of you are probably familiar with the OD Resource Center. It's resourcecenter.odee.osu.edu/accessibility. There's a whole section of help articles and videos that kind of dive in, and it's actually categorized out by the tool that you're using. And so I have a lot of content in there on accessibility in Carmen Canvas if you're curious. There's some for MediaSite, there's some for u.osu, and all that kind of stuff. And so that's a place to explore. Another OSU resource that I have a lot of content on is the distance education blog. And so it's u.osu.edu/distance education. And there's a section there on accessibility. I've got different personas of those with disabilities. So I've got categories for each of those and talking about the unique challenges of those learners. There's also just some UDL basics and some other stuff to read up on talking points. If you're not finding what you need on OSU resources, and those will grow, especially with the policy rollout, those resources are going to grow, and we're figuring out a plan. But we also have WebAIM, which is it's totally separate from OSU. It's kind of the web authority on digital accessibility, and so that's a good place to go. Maybe you're looking for the specifics of how to remediate your PDF using this one legacy version of Adobe Acrobat, right? That's not something that I'm specifically going to maintain on my resources, but you could find that there. And then here's a go.osu link that I have. These are all of my favorite accessibility links that I've got there. And so it's go.osu.edu/access links. And so that's just a box note, and I'll double check that that's still active. I checked it, I think, last week, and it was good. But it's got each of my favorite resources and a little blurb about why you might go there and check it out, just for your further learning and your research. All right, more questions, and this can be on anything and everything. Just make sure you choose all panelists and attendees so we can all see. And this could be time if now you've got questions for Eric too.
Megan, we did have a question come in from Randy a while ago that Eric provided a response to, but I'll ask you too just to see if you have any insight. He said they're looking for ways to make their classroom touch panels more accessible, and those touch panels control the AV tools in the room. So is there any input there? They said they've looked into voice recognition, but they're also looking at touch control features.
Yeah, that is a good question. I know that's something that the classroom technology team, I think, was working on. They did a redesign of those panels, and I don't know if accessibility was high enough on the priority list when they were looking at that. I think yes. Sorry, I'm thinking. I think what I've heard is that with that type of thing, the option to plug in a headset or something like that is usually helpful. This is something that our Digital Accessibility Center coordinator, Pete Bosley, was complaining about the other day too. He's blind, and he was complaining about the panels at, I think, Columbus Public Libraries, that they're brand new and they have like a touchpad to be able to book a room, and that wasn't fully accessible, and it wasn't even at a height that a wheelchair could reach. So there's a lot of things that can go into it, right? I don't have a clear answer for those, but I think it's something that we could escalate to the classroom technology team and see if that's something that they've been working on.
And Megan, you did kind of just touch on physical accessibility, right? Like making sure that you would have something that is of the proper height for somebody who might be in a wheelchair. In November, we're inviting Megan back to do another accessibility webinar for those who weren't able to attend this one, but that one's going to kind of be half and half. So we're going to talk half about digital content, and then we're going to have Laura Agerman talk about physical accessibility. So this would be of great importance for our extension faculty and staff and departmental faculty who are going out into communities or counties or a farm field. How do you make sure that those spaces are physically accessible so that people who might have a physical barrier will still be able to attend and get the same level of content and experience as everyone else? So stay tuned for more information on that. I can't remember what the exact date is, but it's on the calendar. And it was sent out, I think, last week as a save the date. So that'll be coming out too. So what other questions do you have for Megan or Eric while we have them with us?
And I'm also happy I've got my contact info up here to take specific questions. Like I said, I'm used to handling kind of the tricky stuff that comes up in academic courses and making sure that those are equitable, but I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Well, we'll stay on for another few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and give Megan and Eric a huge thank you for being with us today. This is a topic that's really always been important, but it's not a topic that I feel like we've had a ton of focus on over the years. So I'm super happy to see that we have a college accessibility coordinator now. And Eric, that's a wonderful, wonderful thing and a wonderful resource for us to have. If you have questions for Megan or Eric, I'm sure you can reach out directly to them. You can reach out directly to me, and I can help lead you in the right direction to finding those answers. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for your commitment to making more accessible content. This is just, it's going to create for our end users, our community members, a better experience, a better relationship between our community and Ohio State and OSU Extension. So thank you for being here, everybody.
Thank you.